You unlock this door with the key of compassion. Beyond it is another world, a world of science, a world of common sense, a world of sanity. You're moving into a land of both empathy and ethics, of nutritional knowledge and empowerment. You've just crossed over into Dr. Osborne's zone. All right, welcome to Dr. Osborne's Zone. Thanks for coming back, Dr. Hazan. We've got part two today. We talked a little in depth last time about microbiome changes and COVID-19 and what was happening, what you were seeing in your lab, in your research lab. And I'd like to expand on that conversation a little bit more. Maybe we can talk, in terms of microbiome, other aspects of the microbiome beyond viral infections, what you chronically or commonly seeing in terms of things like inflammatory bowel disease. I'd like to dive into fecal transplants a little bit and get your opinion on an experience on what you're seeing recover and what types of situations you're seeing improve as a result of doing that. So let's dive in. Welcome, yes. And let's dive in. So you're a gastroenterologist by trade, and your research lab basically is measuring microbiomes of all kinds of things. And I know you've published a lot of research, and you've got a lot of research that's not published. Talk to me a little bit about how you initially got into analyzing poop for a living, right? And kind of what led to this road for you.
Well, it was an interesting road. I think it started early on in my childhood when I wanted to understand where do we go after we die. And, I was always fascinated by the process of, dying. Do the bodies decompose, and then do they go back to the earth? And is there something happening under the earth? So I think that was really my interest in going into medicine, understanding, is there a process of life after death, right? And then medicine really didn't help me, found out there were a lot of questions that were not answered, and also found a lot of, diseases that we were not fixing. So I went into the research path of clinical trials with pharmaceutical companies with the interest of really, trying to reach a cure with a disease. So, first understanding life, then trying to fix patients, and then trying to fix the disease, right? Entity. And research was really, it brought me to that, asking questions, why did this product work? Why didn't it work? What could we do better? So 300 clinical trials later, about years ago, I was always known as the girl that brought patients with C. diff in clinical trials. And when C. diff became, the process of taking stools from a healthy donor and putting it in a patient with C. diff, and the patient cured or improved, and then other things were improving, I started asking more questions. Wait, what's going on there? And then when I saw on my desk, and of course I wasn't doing any research on that, I was just the girl that pharmaceutical companies were hiring to put products to market, right? So when clinical trials became fecal material in a capsule, and I would get on my desk one protocol after another, feces from Korea, feces from China, feces from MIT students. I looked at these protocols and I'm like, great, we're in the sh.t business and we have no idea what the hell we're doing. We're just seeing something, but it's not something that's reproducible necessarily. So I felt that this was like an amazing path to take. Because when you think about the microbiome, you think of these trillions of microbes that are just inhabiting your gut, that are living in your gut. You become a reservoir for them, right? And there's a process that occurs from the beginning of life to the end of life in the microbiome itself. Like I can tell you a newborn from a person that's going to be dying, right? From their microbiome picture. Not something everybody wants to know necessarily, but I, having done so many analysis of stools, etc., I could definitely see the difference between a newborn and a person and an old person, right? So when that was happening, I said, I wonder if the process of dying is really these microbes that are your bad microbes accumulating in your body and really decomposing your body and putting you back into the ground. So where do these microbes go after we move on, right? So I think to me that was the pursuit of, kind of transferring your mindset to no longer look at your life as a business or a purpose, to gain recognition, but a purpose to understand what is going on. And really, I think this was a path that, God brought me to this. I think, I remember being little asking that question. And really that's been my path, trying to understand the mysteries of life and the mysteries of disease, and really discovering the microbiome, and how fortuitous in a way, and how, I always say God has a sense of humor, because who puts the secret of life in microbes that comes out of our poop and goes into the toilet, So, there is definitely magic in poop. There's power in the microbiome, in the poop that we, put in, that we release. But we're far from understanding it. But I think this is the beginning, and this is an exciting beginning, because it really shows the beauty of an intact microbiome that's balanced, that's resilient, versus one that is not. So that's my path of discovery.
So on that topic of resiliency versus one that's not, what are you guys using for your basis of like, where do you start, right? Okay, so we can take somebody and observationally we'd say this person is robust, they look physically fit, they don't have any known ailments, their biochemistry markers look really good. Is it a matter of taking those types of individuals, analyzing their microbiome, and then say maybe taking somebody with, known inflammatory bowel disease caused by C. diff and looking at theirs in comparison? Is that kind of how you?
I think resilience depends on what you're looking at, right? Resilience on what, right? Are you looking at resilience in the brain? Are you looking resilience in the physique? That's like, that bodybuilder that's building. Are you looking in resilience in comedy? It all depends. What are the features? We're all different. Our beauty as human beings is in our differences. If we were all the same, we'd be a bunch of robots. So if I come out and say, well, resilience equals A, B, C, D, then everybody's going to aspire to have A, B, C, D. But here's the beauty of humanity and how we were created. A, B, C, D only matches a certain population. It doesn't necessarily match the other population. So the same way that we have different fingerprints, we have different microbiomes. But the different microbes really guide us into what our abilities are that we're supposed to do on this planet. We're here for a short time, right? We're here to figure out something, to question something, for a path, right? Seems that my path is understanding the microbiome, right? That's been my direction, my questioning as a scientist, and a physician who plays with poop. But there are other people that have a different path through music, healing through music, musicians that have a beautiful music song that heals, people that do acoustics, people that do, acupuncture, chiropractors, right? So we all have a different gift that makes us who we are, so that we add to the world. I'm going to explain the difference in humanity by looking at, and because I learned that from the microbiome, right? If you take a microbiome that is diverse and has different microbes, bacteria, viruses, and fungi, you're going to notice that certain bacteria need other bacteria to survive, right? It's almost like families. One cannot do what it's supposed to do unless the other one is active. If you kill off that group of microbes that this group of microbe needed, now this group of microbe is not doing what it's supposed to do, right? So it's like action leads to a reaction. You kill one, now you're affecting this one, which is going to kill its purpose and eventually die, right? So now you've got a microbiome that was diverse, but because you killed one group of microbes, you're now out of balance, and all the bad guys get to flourish, and disease starts occurring, and then pretty soon death of the human, right? Because death is really a dysbiosis of the microbiome, where the bad microbes are taking you under the ground and decomposing you. When you look at humanity on the whole, we all have a function, You remove the farmer, you remove my ability to get food on my table. You eliminate my ability to eat and nourish myself to save lives. You inhibit the saving of the next person's life. So it's all full circle. We all need each other. And so what's resilient for one is not necessarily resilient for another. Resilience in a guy who's doing construction is important for him to build up his muscle and increase his protein intake, right? However, resilience for a musician, it's a different sort of, if I'm playing the violin, it's a different, musculature that I need to develop. And it's a lot of hand coordination and nerve pathways. So I think, when we look at resilience, we have to see for what population, for what purpose, and what is that all doing. So it's not a formula that is for all, much like there's no pill for all to fix humans, but we could do the best we can. So that's it.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I could see where it's not like one microbiome size fits all. We're all different, unique. What patterns though? So you talk about like bad bacteria. My question is, are there bad bacteria, or are there bacteria that are just growing out of control because they've been allowed to grow out of control because one of those others were knocked out, and so now the byproduct of them growing, kind of like when we tried to kill when we tried to kill all the snakes, the rats got out of control, right?
100%.
So
That's
yeah.
exactly the same. You kill your spiders, now you've got a lot of flies, and nobody's removing those flies and mosquitoes, right? And then vice versa. You've got a lot of flies and mosquitoes, and now you've got a lot of spiders, because that's just the human kingdom that's just the animal kingdom of taking over, right? So, yeah.
So we're really, then it sounds like we're after diversity of a microbiome. So we're after having all the professions within the city of our microbiome so that they can all get along and work together. And if somebody's pipe breaks, we got microbiome guys that can fix the plumbing. And if somebody's electricity goes out, we got little electronic
exactly
fixers. What if that being the case, what are the things that you see clinically that, aside from the obvious, like we know antibiotics are decimating people's microbiomes, but what else do you find? What else are you seeing clinically that really impacts?
I mean, so, none of that is published yet, so I don't really want to go into what's killing the microbiome until I publish it. But a couple things, and I will be publishing that. Anxiety is not a good thing. Stress is not a good thing. And that's stress from everything, right? Stress that you look at something on the news that upsets you, to stress of your spouse passing, to, all sorts of stressors affect us. You always see like couples where one spouse passes on and then the other one dies 6 months later, right? Because they were symbiotic together, right? When you meet your wife or your spouse or your better half, it's really out of millions of people, you pick that person. Something drew you to her, something attracted you to her. Is it a compatibility of microbes? So here we are trying to create a compatible microbiome, but we don't even understand, how did we even find out of millions of people that one person that connects with us and makes us whole, right? And then that we have children with that person, right? So as you develop a life, and I remember, psychology classes where, my professor would say, the death of a spouse is the hardest thing that could happen because to a human, and I couldn't understand that because I was a child learning that, and I was absolutely not. It has to be parents, right? Loss of a parent. But really, as you grow, as you get, attached to your spouse, as you get dependent on your spouse, you realize, yes, I could see how that is that transition of that symbiosis between a husband and a wife, right? So when I do fecal transplant, one of my best donors, some of my best donors are actually the spouses, because they have something, spouses share very similar microbes as are married for a long time. For example, I've been married to my husband for 30 years. We're very similar. Even when we got married, people would say, are you guys brother and sister? Because you look alike, right? But we have that personality, that look, that's very similar, that's very, symbiotic. When I look at my microbiome of myself and my husband, we're very similar in our microbes. We share the same foods, we kiss, we share those microbes. So with life and me, if let's say I accumulate an overgrowth of microbes, then what's going to happen is, the best person, and I get C. diff, for example, the best person to be my donor would be my husband, because he matches me, right? We're compatible to each other. There's no rejection problem.
Do you find rejection problems in strangers ever? Or have you?
I mean, yeah, that's why I think, when you look at the data of stool banks, it doesn't work for everybody. I looked at my own data without I didn't publish it, but I looked at my own data, couples that when I picked the stool donors from family for C. diff, it definitely worked better for me than the stool bank. I'm not saying the stool bank was bad, but it's just not as good as family donors that are healthy and also fresh stools. So, you have to realize these donors give the poop, it gets frozen, then it gets put in a box, shipped to my office. The quantity is not necessarily the quantity that I want. We defrost it. What does that do to the microbes as we freeze, defreeze? Are we killing some of those microbes? So, fresh, in my opinion, is definitely better. And I think my colleagues in GI that do fecal transplant will also agree. The problem is the technology, and to do that with family members and donors you select is very expensive to test, because you still have to test them like you are a pharmaceutical product. So it's not as easy.
That makes sense. So when you
the problem is also, with strangers, is you don't really know what past medical history that person has, right? So they will tell you what they sign on a questionnaire, but they won't necessarily tell you, that they're suicidal, or that they're bipolar, or that they have, or that they're alcoholics, or that they're druggies, right? So you don't know necessarily what's in that donor poop. And depending on the population you're treating, a population that is, my population is a Malibu population, right? So they're very high profile, and the last thing I want to do is be in the limelight, having caused a problem to one of my celebrity patients. So I always try to aim on do no harm and be as safe as possible, right? So that population, I'm very delicate with that. I would not, and they wouldn't want a stool donor. They would want to know, who is the donor? Is he bipolar? I want to meet him. I want to know about him. It's not feasible the way that it is right now in pharmaceutical companies.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. If I were going in to do that, I would certainly want to be able to screen my donor. Do people get paid to donate? I mean, are there like blood banks? Are there poop banks now?
Yeah. So poop banks, and it's advertised all over. You get paid like, $200, $300 to donate. So you can imagine you're an MIT student and you're getting paid $300 per bowel movement. The questionnaire says, have you traveled abroad? No. Do you drink alcohol? No. Do you use drugs? No. So, it's a little bit tricky, right? So especially these college kids, let's be real, there's a lot of partying going on in those fraternities and sororities. So
when they fill out those questionnaires, they're probably full of shit, right?
Yes, not necessarily the right shit. So
Interesting. You mentioned earlier, so when you do a successful transplant, let's say, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is not my expertise, but the only treatment approved right now in the U.S. is for treatment of Clostridium difficile inflammatory bowel disease. Is that accurate to say?
Correct. Yes.
So I could imagine that there are probably cofactors involved in people that have Crohn's or ulcerative colitis where they have other diseases as well, other symptoms, that are not just really restricted to, to the bowel itself. Do you see clinically these people feeling better, getting better in other ways beyond the inflammatory bowel condition that's being treated?
So for C. diff, when we do fecal transplant for C. diff, what we noticed was that C. diff improved by the change by reinstating a diversity, right? What we saw with C. diff is that a couple cases that had arthritis as their secondary problem improved. What improved that was arthritis and now is no longer, right? And when you start focusing on patients' microbiome and healing their guts, you start noticing their inflammation is dropping, right? I'm sure you've noticed it because you've been doing this, forever as a naturopath, as a chiropractor. You've noticed yourself that, hey, I fixed the gut, my patients are getting better. So you are intuitively improving their microbiome without having to do fecal transplant. That's the key. So
do you use other parameters when you measure? So there's just a lot of possibilities in my mind that are swirling around. One of them that we see a lot of is lipopolysaccharide penetrance into the bloodstream, and they have antibodies, to LPS as a result of, whatever kind of abnormal bacteria that are growing in them. We see it a lot with Klebsiella and arthritis and Enterobacter and Citrobacter and rheumatoid arthritis and other forms of autoimmune arthritis. Are you guys measuring just microbiome, or are you also measuring some of these other lab parameters?
No, we're measuring definitely lab parameters, and we're also measuring metabolites. We're just starting. We have a metabolite. We have a functional pathway, a functional pipeline that basically tells us it's a messenger RNA pipeline that basically it shows us functionality. So we're starting to see which microbes are doing what and secreting what in what disease. And we're also looking at viruses, because I think that's part of the picture. We're not focusing too much on parasites because of the fact that, listen, if you have a vacant gut, parasites are going to settle in, right? So, and especially with the whole, killing the microbiome, the bacteria, which is supposed to sustain your gut, and now you're eating sushi, of course you're going to have parasites. They're all in the sushi, right? I mean, all these little worms are just, you see them naked to the naked eye. So I think, that's the mistake that people make too often is they don't know what's in their gut and they essentially just kill. It's important not to just kill, but to understand what's living in your gut and what should be there to begin with. And how do you go back to your original microbiome after you've demolished it? That's the key.
What are some of the home-based strategies you give patients? They've destroyed their gut. Maybe they have a year of, 5 antibiotics. Maybe they have a chronic history of just massive antibiotic use for whatever reason. What are some of the things that you're having them focus on, the takeaways that they could do at home, non-medicinal, that might help to improve their diversity?
Those are the takeaways that everybody's talking about, right? The prebiotic, the probiotic, well, I wouldn't say probiotic, but the fermented foods, the vitamins, the nutraceutical pathways, all that is important. The decreased stress, making sure your vitamin D level is up to par, et cetera, et cetera. So I think all that, everybody by now knows. Look, like I said, if you have a resilient microbiome, it's going to bounce back no matter what, if you took 3 or 4 courses of antibiotics. If you don't have a resilient microbiome, then, it's not going to bounce back no matter what you do. And then at that point, it becomes a part of Okay, you killed which microbe, and now how do you reimplant that microbe? How do you allow that growth of that microbe? So when I look at the microbiome, for me, and what our lab does is really analyze the microbiome at a forensic, really. I not only look at what's overgrown, the Klebsiella, the Citrobacter, all those. I look at what's missing. What is missing that allowed those Klebsiella to go in, right? So, and that's where so one of the microbes that we look at, and which you've seen me talk about, and hashtag save the BIF, which I'm coming out with t-shirts to raise money for research, save the BIF. The bifidobacteria is a bacteria that's in newborn. It's disappearing. You're seeing newborns that are born without bifidobacteria. That's a problem. You follow these newborns. Are they going to develop autism because they've lost their bifidobacteria? Are they going to develop Crohn's disease? Are they going to develop Lyme disease? Because now they're in a park and they've been stung, but they've been hit by a tick, and that starts its own domino effect. So I think we have to not only look at what we're overgrowing, but we have to look at what we've killed, and the killing, to me, is more important than what we have overgrown, because the killing, you cannot regrow. You cannot, you kill all the farmers, you're not going to have food in your house, right? So at the end of the day, it's that relationship, right? It's, I have Klebsiella in my gut, but what did I lose to get Klebsiella to begin with? And here's the thing, it's not that simple to regrow. People think, well, I'm going to take probiotics. Oh yeah, it's going to fix me. Wrong. It doesn't. Trust me. I've tried. I'm trying. It's not straightforward, and it's not a formula for all, and it's not all have the same. I give an example of bifidobacteria because that's one of the prominent microbes in the, American culture. But if you go to China, it's a different microbe that's prominent over there. That's their good guys. If you go to Japan, it's another microbe. We tend to want to globalize the world and have everybody be similar, but not everybody is similar, right? So we have to be conscientious. The Amazon jungle, if you look at the Amazon jungle, you barely see any bifidobacteria, yet these people are healthy. What is going on there? So that's the story.
But US, you see predominantly bifido. I think the audience listening to this.
I'm focusing on bifido because that's what I'm seeing is disappearing. That's what I'm seeing. Is disappearing in long haulers. This is disappeared in you saw my research of before and after. We showed bifidobacteria before in my patients, and then after vaccination, the bifidobacteria disappeared, right? And then it persisted in killing so something in that spike protein, killed, maybe contamination. There's data from, Kevin McKernan that basically talks about, contamination. And then you saw Philip, also Balkhiles. Those two have like complicated names that I can't memorize. I can never say it properly, but those two guys, did some amazing, incredible research that essentially, needs to be recognized, and is probably the reason that I was seeing loss of bifidobacteria in the patients post-vaccination. So to me, that's an alarming problem, something we need to pay attention to. And also, look, there's a whole company that was sponsored by Bill Gates that basically on probiotics, on B. infantis, because he put out the narrative that B. infantis is disappearing from infants. So why is B. infantis disappearing from infants? Are we stopping moms from breastfeeding their babies? And maybe there's something in the breast milk that allows these babies to grow their bifidobacteria, and maybe giving them formula is not the answer. There's a lot of different questions that I have. Unfortunately, we live in a world that is all about sell, marketing 101, instill fear and sell a product. We need to slow down and understand what's going on and not just sell.
Yeah, we see the same B. infantis in celiacs and gluten sensitive individuals as well. And there's actually evidence that is showing their symptoms reduce with supplementation of B. infantis specifically. Although I would argue, just like what you said earlier, you can take a probiotic and feel better, but diet change's got to happen, and other lifestyle variable factors also have to be involved as well.
Absolutely.
So
I think, not only the B. infantis, but also, are we supposed to be putting these babies on formula? What happens if the formula company disappears? Then, you're out of luck. So I think we need to be more conscientious.
have you looked at babies that are being born that were born via cesarean versus vaginal birth to see what kind of differences are there?
Yeah, there's definitely some differences, nothing that I can discuss. But one of the things that we have to realize about C-section versus vaginal is, yes, the exposure to the stools of the mom in the newborn via vaginal, but also the stress of the pregnancy in C-section is important. Is the stress of the pregnancy on the newborn affecting the production? So, a mom that's breastfeeding her baby that had a C-section is not going to have, a super potent quality breast milk compared to a mom who delivered vaginally and now is not in pain, right? I know I have two girls, and I can tell you, my production of breast milk was not as strong for my oldest one, and she was constantly hungry, as opposed to my little one that, I was delivered by vaginal. The other one was delivered C-section, so I think that plays a role. By the way, the intuition of the microbiome being passed on from mother to child came to me because of my own experiences as a mom. Because what I realized was when I had my first child, I was craving all sorts of vegetables, and the kid only ate vegetables. And then my second child, I was craving garbage food, and she only eats garbage food. So did I, was she instructing me to feed her what she wanted? Those are the mysteries of life. So, but that was one thing that I noticed as a physician dealing with the microbiome. And actually it ended up being, fortuitous in a way, because I started seeing that the mom, when I looked at the kids with autism, I started noticing microbes that the mom shared with her kids. I had a mom that had triplets. Two of the triplets had a completely normal microbiome and were neurotypical. The third triplet was autistic, but he carried some of the microbes that the mom had, but twice as much as the other two kids. So that case, you wonder, did mom pass on some of the bad microbes to the weaker kid that was autistic? And did the other two fight for the good microbes? It's basically all about nutrition.
That's funny. We see that in our pigs, not so much the way they're fighting internally in the womb, but after the fact. Like we have kune pigs, and so on our farm, we'll have, our mama pig will have like 8 babies, and then you'll see them over the course of the next several months. Some of the babies are like massive, and they're like big pigs, and some of them are like little tiny small things. And of course they're always in there, chomping at the bit, pushing each other back and forth to try to get at their food. We feed them alfalfa because they're kune, so they eat grass. But anyway, it's interesting to see those differences.
I saw that with my chickens. I used to have chickens. And basically that was the same experience. A mom would have newborns, chicks, and then, one of the chicks would be so weak and die, 2 days after birth, but the others were like super healthy and so I think it all happens in utero and then after. So it's, it's not so straightforward, especially with the autism path.
Where do you see this going from a research perspective? Like, do you see like major therapeutics being able to come out of this where where, maybe we can apply certain bacteria or apply certain elements that might feed certain bacteria, like postbiotics, probiotics, etc. As I know, we're seeing some things like with anxiety, and we're seeing some things now with inflammatory bowel and things, the emphasis, as we talked about with celiac disease. Do you see a lot of therapeutic component coming out of all this research?
I think there's going to be a push in the next few years to have more natural foods, go back to basics of natural foods. I think that's what we're going to see, because we're going to discover that nutrition is so important. What we're seeing in the microbiome, where we're seeing, loss of bifidobacteria in invasive cancer, loss of bifidobacteria in Lyme, loss of bifidobacteria in Crohn's, that tells you something. So we need to start pushing nutrition, not just these biologics, right, to fix the human beings. I think the other thing that we're going to start seeing is probably a composition of microbes, a consortium of microbes that are as therapies for different diseases. I think it's important to, first of all, find out what the disease is lacking or having, and then from there adding the consortium. But here's the problem. You could find, a mixture of microbes for a certain disease, but is that the same mixture of microbes that is present in every population? And therefore, is that consortium that I'm going to create to offset those microbes what I should be giving to every population? That's one. Number two is that consortium going to make it to the cecum where it's supposed to be, or is it going to get killed by the stomach? What happens when a probiotic gets killed in the stomach or gets killed in the small intestine, or never reaches the cecum? And then what happens when you implant? I always, there's so many variables to making something stick, right? You look at and I was thinking about that the other day. You look at a process like in vitro, right? When they started doing in vitro, extracting eggs from the woman's ovaries, taking the sperms and putting it in a petri dish, and then implanting that embryo back into the uterus, the success rate was like 10%, 30 years ago or 20 years ago. But then little by little, they started realizing, wait, there's something else that we could add to increase the implantation. We shouldn't be doing this to avoid implantation. That's what we are with the microbiome, right? So there are things that I do to improve my fecal transplant. There are things that I do to make sure that I have success. But it's not a standard of care yet. First of all, it's not a standard of care until I write what I do and somebody else reproduces it, right? And then reproduces it on a larger scale. So stopping that progression stops research, right, in a way. So when you have like a company that is feeling like they're being affected, their stock prices of their drug is being affected because, there's a new kid on the block that's getting all the attention. You think about, the microbiome is getting all the attention, right? And pharmaceutical companies are not there yet, right? So they're going to try to censor as much as possible on the magic of fecal transplant because it doesn't suit their purpose. They're not there. They're selling another product. Here's the thing. You censor that, eventually the truth doesn't come out, and it may never come out. And what happens is when that CEO of a pharmaceutical company becomes the patient, he's coming to you to ask questions. How can you fix me? Well, how can I fix you? I can't fix you because there's no guidelines. Because, so doctors follow guidelines. That's what protects them as doctors from being sued, right? So if I step away, like think about yourself. You may have a patient with Parkinson's and you may say, let's do fecal transplant. But you didn't do the proper diligence to make sure that patient, you weren't giving him the same microbe he has that worsened his Parkinson's. Or you didn't do the due diligence to make sure that you didn't give him a microbe that causes something else, right? So now the patient dies on your table. You did a procedure that was completely not approved and that the FDA is overseeing, but you did it, outside. Now you're standing outside and you have no protection. Doctors and gastroenterologists, believe me, we all want to do fecal transplant to see the truth, right? But here's the problem. The moment you step away and something happens, you're liable, and then the whole field is disintegrated, right? Is gone.
Yeah.
When fecal transplant was a thing, and us as GI doctors were noticing that it was a thing, pharma figured out, hey, we can start a product of feces in a capsule, right? And make money out of it. But here's the problem is, doctors were doing it with their patients, and the guidance of the FDA, they didn't need pharmaceutical companies, and they were achieving 92% success. Why would they use a pharmaceutical product that's giving them 20, 30, 40% success, right? You're getting 92% using the wife's poop, and it doesn't cost you, $10,000 of using a pharmaceutical product, right? So what's the pharmaceutical company going to do? They're going to start saying, oh my God, those GI doctors, they're horrible. They're making money off doing fecal transplant. So now the GI doctors are the bad guys, right? And then
they're as bad as the chiropractors.
There you go. And now there's going to be 2 people that are going to die. Never mind the fact that there was 40,000 cases plus a fecal transplant done around the world that were safe. 2 people died. So now, like the mass media, oh my God, 2 people are died from fecal transplant. Still 2 out of 40,000. So now the doctor is like, oh, I'm not touching this. And here's the thing. The product is out there as a pharmaceutical company, as a pharmaceutical product. I, as a GI doctor, cannot even test. Let's say I want, my patients in Malibu, they want to know their donors. They don't care about the money. They want to spend the money on the stool testing. I cannot even test their stools anymore because Quest and LabCorp, when you call them and you say, I'd like to do an ESBL testing, CRE and VRE on my patient's stools, they're like, sorry, we don't do that anymore. You don't need to do that, Dr. Hazan. There's a pharmaceutical product available for you. I'm like, well, my patient doesn't want the pharmaceutical product. What happens when the pharmaceutical product doesn't work? So here's the thing. We have to wait now for that pharmaceutical product to either work or fail. But meanwhile, people are not even doing fecal transplant for C. diff because they're using this pharmaceutical product. So, what is it going to be? 5 years till we see the truth and realize, hey, these pill products are not that greatest, or the pharmaceutical product is not the greatest, and therefore we should go back to doing fecal transplant, right? So, it's a problem. And again, I bring it back to the head of that pharmaceutical product, who now becomes the patient and comes see. And this has been my whole life, by the way. I've been doing clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies, and I work with a lot of medical directors, executives from pharma, and they believe in this one product and they're all on it and they start taking it and they're all believing in it. Then they get sick and then they come to me and they're like, oh my God, I should have, listened, I shouldn't have done this. And can you fix me now? Well, no, I can't fix you now. I don't know what you did, right? So we need to do the research properly. It should not be a business. It should be, more for humanity, because we're all going to be patients, and interference with medicine and interference with research affects all of us.
I mean, isn't that why we have an FDA and a CDC that's publicly funded by taxpayer dollars? I mean, what, obviously it's corrupt as hell, and it's
influenced, I would say. It's influenced by money. Revolving doors. Think about the guy that's working at the FDA is now promised a job to work in a pharmaceutical company, and now he's got retirement assured and he's got his benefits and everything. But again, that FDA agent that revolved doors went to pharma is going to be a patient. There's no escaping disease. There's no escaping life. Is going to have his kids, potentially with autism, and then it comes back. And then you look back at your life and you go, I shoulda, coulda, woulda, but I didn't. So, I tried to live my life as righteous as possible, to do the right thing, and as meticulous as possible to not do harm. How others live their life, it's their deal. But, I think when you have achieved certain things in your life and you're comfortable, and, you have to look back at life and say, what am I here for? What's my purpose? Purpose is to ensure that humanity continues to live, you know? And at the rate that we're going, when I look at the microbiome of Africans that have 11 phylums and the microbiome of Americans that have 3 to 4 phylums, it's disappearing fast. You know, you look at the Amazon jungle full of diverse microbes. You know, you take away the Amazon jungle, you take away the Amazonians, you've lost that diversity of microbes. You know, really, the Amazon jungle represent the beginning of life, right? So the more we destroy, the more we touch it. Preservation is really not touching things, right? When you preserve lemons, you're putting them with salt in a container, you're sterilizing it, and you don't touch it. The moment you open the container, you allow microbes to come in. So I think, you know, we've kind of messed up the microbiome of humanity, in my opinion. I would challenge to say that perhaps we are not living longer, but we are dying sooner. That's my theory. And I think part of it is because we have destroyed the microbiome of humanity.
Yeah, and I would even add that the quality of life, you know, maybe we could argue that 30 or 40 years ago we had better quality, but today the quality, all I see around me are people who can't breathe, who are so overweight they can barely walk, and their knees hurt all the time, their backs and necks hurt all the time. Their quality of day to day is just it's you know, they're crutching through with molecular chemistry as a suppression mechanism to be able to just have a day.
And you're right, and you touched on obesity, right? Globalization equals globicity. You know, we're having a global problem of obesity around the world. Are we destroying little by little those microbes that are helping us metabolize, right? And have we done too much? You know, have we, you know, maybe the idea of vaccination is a good idea, but have we done too much? Have we forgot, you know, maybe the idea of antibiotics? Yes. Obviously, the idea of antibiotics, vaccination, all that, you know, is a good concept, you know, when you're dying of Klebsiella pneumonia. But the problem is, are you forgetting that while you're dying of Klebsiella pneumonia, you're also killing the microbes that allow something else? And maybe it's not all about killing. Maybe it's about killing that bad bug to suppress it, but then adding the good bugs to enrich, to bring back the planet, you know, bring back, you know, think about our fecal material goes back to the planet. You have a microbiome that is abnormal, that is out of balance. That's going back into the septic. That was one of the things that I thought of when we discovered COVID in the stools. I said, oh my God, what is COVID doing to the planet, right? Now, we fabricated this virus probably, right? And it's not a natural it was not a natural virus. You know, this was not something we've seen before. It was definitely a genetic sequence that we saw. What is that genetic sequence doing to the microbiome of the planet overall? And if you now extrapolate the stools of the human that go back to the planet full of, you know, whether it's spike protein, full of, you know, virus, full of bacteria, full of toxins, what are all those doing to the overall microbiome of the planet? And is there such a thing as an imbalance in the microbiome of the planet that could create a disappearance of the planet, right? So take it from the microscopic level. The microbiome tells us what's going to happen, right? So take it, I want you to look into the invisible and see imbalance of microbes allow for viruses and bacterial toxins to penetrate, right? Now you've got bad microbes taking over that human, creating disease, and then the human dies. Now extrapolate that to humanity. Kill the microbiome of a race, for example. Now you have an imbalance in the microbiome of humanity where you've got, only one race that is dominating, but that race is lacking, differences that other races had, right? Does that create an imbalance in the overall microbiome of the planet? And then is there a shift in the microbiome of the planet that lets the planet disappear? That's really what I fear. This is what I worry about. When I look at the whole big picture of the microbiome, and when I look beyond my life 100 years from now. And here's the other thing is, if there's something to these microbes, you asked me, how did I get into this field, right? And to me, it was a discovery of life. If there is something to these microbes, and, they go into the earth, reestablish themselves, come back as a fruit, come back as a plant, fruit gets eaten by the animal, goes into the microbiome of the animal gets eaten by a human, goes into the microbiome of a human, that whole circle of life, demolishing the circle of life, what happens next, right? So, because right now, life starts, but life continues even after death, right? So that's what I see every day.
Yeah, it reminds me, I just read a study published a couple of days ago it's out of South America, and they were analyzing the urine concentration of glyphosate and 2,4-D in these children, and then they were coordinating the levels that they would find with the neurological disorders that were present. And so I think it was 98% of the kids had glyphosate and like 66% had 2,4-D. And in the kids that had 2,4-D, their level of misbehavior, psychological misbehavior in school, their level of cognitive function, memory, and learning was all diminished dramatically compared to those that didn't have it. And it was something similar with glyphosate. And you think, is that because it's affecting their microbiome? Is that affecting the microbes that generate the neurotransmitters in the GI tract like dopamine and serotonin, thus affecting behavior and thought?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, dopamine, think about dopamine, right? You look at people with Parkinson's that lack dopamine. They're very stoic. They don't have a sense of humor anymore. They're very, there's that spasticity, that frozen, right? They'll talk and they'll say, oh, I'm frozen, I can't move, right? Those are lack of microbes, right? That we're giving them the dopamine. And so we've eliminated the dopamine ability to be secreted. How are these people surviving? They have to take dopamine to survive. But imagine if we give them back those dopamine microbes, right? Could we improve Parkinson's? Yeah.
So where are we at in terms of, the research or the ability to medically do fecal transplants for non-inflammatory bowel disease issues? Are we anywhere close to that? I mean, is that just as far in the future as you can imagine?
Far in the future as you can imagine, unfortunately. Yeah. I'll tell you, they who control the dollar sign want a pharmaceutical product. That's it. So, and there's not going to be a pharmaceutical product. I can save them a lot of money and time. There's not going to be a pharmaceutical product. So
you can't compete with natural. I mean, you can't compete with God. I don't know how many times we have to learn the lesson.
And even the thing is, do they even want an improve? Do they even want, right now biologics are making a fortune.
Yeah.
I mean, think about those Crohn's patients that are on biologics every 6 weeks, right? They're making a fortune. So it's a cash cow for a company, right? But at some point we have to kind of do a little, I understand the biologic because I use them. I've used them for my patients, and that sometimes that's all I have. But at the same time, that company needs to give back, and give back in research to do the right thing. So, my job, and I think, I'm positioned in an interesting place because I've been doing clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies. I think my job is to bring pharma to see the microbiome. I think my job is to kind of say, okay, guys, you've done well. Now let's take that money and let's start investing in microbiome therapeutics so that we can get another solution that's a little bit more sustainable, that's a little bit better for humanity, that doesn't make, think about the executive in a bank who is tired of going to the doctor every 4 weeks to get his biologics, or 6 weeks, right? He doesn't want to be reminded he's a patient. He wants to get rid of the problem and move on. Let's see some other answer, some other solution. I think the mistake we make as humanity is we think it's a one pill solution, but it's not. It can all coexist. When emails came, the post office thought they were going to go out of business, but now we're busy with emails and the mailbox. I get emails from people faster. It's much faster, but I also get my stuff through the mail. So, both the post office and the emails are busy. Both are living together. We live in a virtual world and we live in a real world, and both of them somehow we're managing to do. So I don't think we will be hurting if we went to look at the microbiome space to help patients a different way. And we may come to find out that 1/3 of the population with Crohn's actually is helped by biologic, 1/3 is helped by microbiome alteration, and 1/3 is helped by, something else. So I think we need to explore all that. Ulcers are not just treated by focusing on H. pylori and treating H. pylori. There's ulcers that are caused by stress. There's ulcers that are caused by aspirin, medications, gastritis, so we have to have a differential diagnosis, and we cannot stop research, the bottom line. So I wish I could say, yes, it's very promising. We're going to be doing fecal transplant for inflammatory bowel disease and Crohn's and for Parkinson's and all that. But unfortunately, unless it's sponsored by a pharmaceutical company and they're not really that excited to go into that route, it's very difficult to get the funds. Look at autism, right? I improved the case with autism. The kid is speaking, saying words, and he went to prom with a girl in May. Super happy. The family's happy. He's no longer banging his head on the wall. He's no longer nonverbal. This was a miracle case, in my opinion. Do I believe this kid needs more? Of course, but with every fecal transplant, he improved his scars, he improved his scores, his sensory, his affect, his speech. So, we want to see more. I want to be able to see more without it costing me $308,000 of regulatory documents to submit one kid through fecal transplant, right? And I want to be able to do my 30 kids. Why am I not moving? Why is there such a delay? It should be, wow, Dr. Hazan, you have a one case. Let's get you to do 30 more. Let's see if you succeed in 30. Why was there a delay? Why is there a delay? And then on top of that, I have to start raising funds. So I created a nonprofit, Microbiome Research Foundation.org, to help raise that. But, it's not that easy to raise all that. So here I am juggling as a scientist, as a physician, to see my protocol succeed. And I have to somehow also find the funds and also, try to write the data. And by the way, the data is not published on that one kid. Why? It was a great case. And the FDA was involved. They even saw the mom, right? And talked to the mom. Why is the case not published? This is a great case. It's the first case of familial FMT in autism, right? Because they said they would, doctors in the past, and the doctor who, by the way, passed the baton to me to take over, autism, Dr. Sidney Feingold, would say, don't use family's microbiome because they could be sharing the same microbes, and you're giving the bad microbes to the kid. It's not going to help you. And I would disagree with him, because I said to him, what if we have the ability to look at all these microbes? And that's where the microbiome testing that we do at Progenibiome was basically to see these microbes. What are they doing? And then to make sure that if I'm using the stools of a kid that's a sibling, it's clean to the best of my ability. So, but here's a case that obviously not all familial FMTs are going to be successful. Not all FMTs are going to be successful. But if we can get 1 or 2 or 10 kids to be improved with familial FMT, that's amazing. That would be amazing. So
agreed. I mean, that's how research is done. You start with n equals 1, and you propose a hypothesis, and then you get your study funded, and then you get more data from more people, and then when n equals 1,000 and you have 30% success rate, and now you really have something, right? You have something that statistically matters and can save or change lives indefinitely, and you have an archival knowledge that can be passed on to the next set of researchers who maybe have a different way of thinking and can do it as well. I've always loved the way science is supposed to be decentralized, where you have something you prove in your lab and others will prove it in their labs, and and they do it even maybe through slightly different variant efforts, and this is what makes it so great. But when you have a few very wealthy companies in control of everything, and hoarding over the dollars that are being distributed that are our damn tax dollars, and they have no right making any decisions about where our tax dollars go. Our tax dollars should go for the good of the people and not for the good of the few. And it just seems like our system has been corrupt to the point where we can't fund meaningful things. I mean, I look back just on vitamin C as research funding. Linus Pauling advanced the knowledge of vitamin C to such a great degree, and then all of a sudden everything in the nutrition world came to a screeching halt. How do you get nutritional research done? It's very hard to do anymore. And COVID allowed us to do so much nutritional research on vitamin D and vitamin C and some of the other micronutrients like quercetin and zinc, which we never had before. But now we have all this wonderful data on COVID being treated successfully with all these nutraceuticals, and in my opinion, far more successfully than things like remdesivir. But that was done because there was an overwhelming outpouring of research funds going toward what everyone perceived to be a threat or an emergency.
Yeah, I think because you can't patent vitamins, right? So
yeah, but that's just it. That boils back down to the money part, right? It's like, are we in this for the right reason, or are we in this to make money? And I get it. Companies need to make money. They have shareholders. They have fiduciary responsibilities, but at what cost?
Countries need to make money. I mean, that's the reality. But at some point, we're gonna get ourselves into a whole big problem when 1 in 1 kid is autistic. Then who's going to be doing the jobs in the country? And yeah, sure, you could bring in robots, but there goes humanity. So
there goes humanity. That's it, I guess. But then again, maybe the robots develop autism because there's a robot microbiome in the oil. Who knows?
I tend to think that everything happens for a reason, right? So maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. Who knows? Maybe we've gotten so bad that the turning point is,
hard to say.
It's hard to say, and it's really depressing to see that, because I'm a humanitarian, and I believe in humanity, and I believe in humanity being beautiful, no matter what what gender, what sex, what religion you are, what race you are, what color skin you are. It's a shame that not everybody sees the beauty of humanity. It really is, and it's a shame that we are stopped in research. Because there are so many miracles we could be looking and seeing and understanding life, right? Understanding life, the process of dying, these microbes taking over your bodies, and these microbes going back into the world, into the planet. What are they doing after? Do they come back? What's going on? I think that's the biggest mystery there's so much to discover. We have the technology now to look at microbes from ancient ruins, from microbes in the deserts of the Sahara, from microbes in lions to microbes in horses and cows and humans from Africa to humans in the Amazon jungle. So that's my passion. That's what drives me. That's what I want to learn. That's what I'm learning. It's too bad that I guess I could write the book, and I will be writing the second book. But right now I'm in the trenches of the research to try to see as much as I can.
Well, keep going, because we need researchers like you to enlighten us. I love researchers. I'm not a researcher. I'm a clinician more than than anything else. But I use research to help me judge and guide decisions every day. And without those researchers doing that science, then, we really are at a loss. So I really value your work and appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. By the way, talking about Linus Pauling and vitamin C, we published, if you'll recall, so we found COVID in the stools, we found loss of bifidobacteria in severe COVID patients, and we published vitamin C increases the bifidobacteria. So that was a breakthrough for us, finding during the pandemic. So that was great. And the paper is still in publication. Thank God they haven't touched it. I'm surprised. They did try to remove the paper on finding COVID in the stools. They did try to remove the paper of, the lost microbes of COVID-19. And they definitely removed my paper of ivermectin hypothesis that it increases bifidobacteria. But the data, I'm happy to say, is going to be shown at American College of Gastro on October 25th. Where it does increase the bifidobacteria. So that was probably what helped me during COVID when I was using ivermectin for my patients. And again, it wasn't a one pill solution. As much as you said, nutraceuticals helped your patients with COVID, there were some patients that did all that and did not succeed in getting treated. And that's where you have to go, okay, well, what else can I give, right? Then I got to kill the virus. So I'm going to give hydroxy. I got to kill the virus. I'm going to give Z-Pak. I got to increase the bifidobacteria. I'm going to give extra vitamin C, extra vitamin D, extra, ivermectin. And basically that's how learning occurs. And that's how you discover how to survive COVID and how to lose no one on the pandemic. So, which has been me in a nutshell. So.
Yep, absolutely. Well, this has been a great conversation, a great part two. Appreciate your work and appreciate all you do. People want to check out your foundation. Could you say the name of your foundation again?
Microbiome Research Foundation.org, and then Progenibiome, Progenibiome.
Okay.
And the reason I named it Progenibiome is from your genes to your microbiome. So Progenibiome.
Love it. We're going to put links below for those of you who want to go read more and maybe even donate to the cause of research. Okay. Well, I really appreciate this conversation. I appreciate you. Thanks so much for being a part of it and sharing your wisdom and knowledge.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning into Dr. Osborne's Zone. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to the Dr. Osborne Zone. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe for more content like this, and make sure you come back next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time and Thursday at noon 30 for more episodes.